Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We're always trying to find those more effective ways to learn things, especially when it comes to languages.
Right.
So today we're going to be focusing on learning English.
Okay.
And
Whoa.
we're going to be looking at storytelling. We've got some fascinating research here that shows how storytelling can be a really powerful tool.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just, reading a book before bed. It goes way beyond that.
Okay, so one of the things that really jumped out at me was this idea of emotional engagement being so key to remembering new words and grammar.
Hmm.
It's not just about, rote memorization. It's about actually connecting with the story on a deeper level.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the research actually backs that up. There was this one study that showed that learners who had like a strong emotional response to a story, they were way more likely to remember the words and the grammar that were used in it.
That makes total sense. It's like you remember the details of a movie that really made you laugh or cry even years later,
Right.
right? You might forget other movies you saw around the same time, but
Right.
the ones that really hit you emotionally, those stick with you.
It's like those key phrases and words become embedded in your memory because they're connected to like a feeling.
Yeah, those emotional anchors for the language.
Exactly. And I think the science behind it is really fascinating too.
Ah,
It has to do with the way our emotions actually influence memory formation.
Uh-huh.
So the amygdala, which is this part of our brain
okay.
that processes emotions, it plays a big role in this.
Okay.
And when we experience a really strong emotion, the amygdala gets activated. And that helps to make those memories more durable.
Wow, so there's actual brain science going on here. It's not just like a
Yeah, it's
feeling.
like a biological process.
That's really cool. So I'm already starting to see how powerful this could be for language learning, but I'm wondering, how do we actually put this into practice? How can we use storytelling to effectively learn English?
Yeah. Well, there are a few different approaches that have been really successful.
Okay.
Um, One that stands out to me is the TPR storytelling method,
Okay.
which stands for total physical response.
Total physical response. So you're not just like sitting there listening to a story.
No,
You're actually,
it involves incorporating like physical actions into the storytelling process.
oh, so you're like acting out parts of the story as you're listening or as you're,
Precisely.
okay.
So let's say the story's about a bird flying. You might flap your arms like wings,
Okay.
or if a character is tiptoeing quietly, you might mimic that action.
Uh-huh.
And this physical engagement, it makes it a lot more fun and memorable.
Sure.
But it also activates different parts of your brain
Oh, wow.
and strengthens those neural connections.
I can see how that would help make the language stick in your mind. It's like you're literally embodying the words.
Yeah, you're not just hearing them, you're experiencing them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I bet it's especially helpful for people who are more visual learners.
Absolutely. And, it really taps into the way we learn as children.
Right.
Think about how kids learn through play and movement.
Yeah.
It's very intuitive and engaging.
You're right. We've been learning this way all along. We just didn't realize we could apply it to language learning as adults.
Yeah, it's like we've had this secret code to how our brains work.
Exactly.
And another method that kind of unlocks that natural learning process is the story learning method.
Yeah.
And this one really emphasizes immersing yourself in these compelling stories
Okay.
and letting the language just wash over you organically.
So instead of getting bogged down in, all the grammar rules and the vocabulary lists, you're just enjoying a story and absorbing the language naturally along the way.
That's the idea. Think about like watching your favorite TV show in English.
Right.
You're not sitting there with a notebook taking notes.
Yeah.
But you're picking up new words and phrases,
Right.
and you're getting a feel for how the language flows in different contexts.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
I love how both of these methods kind of take the pressure off of traditional language learning
Yeah.
and make it feel more natural and enjoyable.
It's like you're tricking your brain into learning without even realizing it.
Exactly.
And the best part is you're tapping into something that we all inherently enjoy.
Yeah.
A good story.
Right.
Stories have a way of captivating our attention, transporting us to different worlds, and making us care about the characters.
That's so true. And it's interesting because it seems like with these methods, the focus is less on memorizing individual words and more about understanding how the language works as a whole. You're getting a feel for the rhythm, the flow, the nuances of expression.
Precisely. And as you get deeper into these stories, you start to notice these patterns in the language, these subtle nuances and meaning, and the ways in which words work together to create this rich tapestry of communication.
It's like you're immersing yourself in the culture of the language through stories,
Exactly.
which is such a powerful way to learn.
And you know what's really fascinating is that recent research has shown that immersing yourself in stories can actually change the way your brain processes language.
Wow.
It's not just about acquiring new vocabulary, it's about developing a deeper understanding of how the language functions on like a cognitive level.
So it's actually rewiring your brain for fluency.
In a way.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But before we go any further,
Sure.
can we maybe dive into some specific examples of how these storytelling methods work in practice?
Absolutely. Let's take a closer look at the TPR storytelling method and how it can really bring language learning to life.
Okay.
Okay, so imagine a teacher telling a story about a mischievous monkey, swinging through a jungle.
Okay.
And as the monkey swings from vine to vine,
Mm-hmm.
the students are like mimicking that action, stretching out their arms, swaying back and forth.
So you're not just passively listening, you're actually engaging with the story,
Exactly.
using your whole body.
Yeah, and those physical actions, they really help to anchor those new words and phrases.
In your memory. It's like, I don't know, learning a dance routine.
Oh, yeah.
The movements become so connected to the music that it makes it so much easier to remember the steps.
That's a great analogy.
And in TPR storytelling, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The repetition of those movements just reinforces that connection between the words and their meanings.
Exactly.
So it's like this fun, interactive way to learn vocabulary and grammar without even realizing you're studying.
Right.
It's great.
Now, shifting gears a little bit to the story learning method.
Okay.
It takes a slightly different approach, but with a similar goal of making language acquisition feel natural and effortless.
Now, earlier you mentioned that I was looking for ways to make vocabulary stick.
Right.
How does this method...
How does story learning help?
Yeah, how does that help with that?
Well, instead of focusing on like isolated words and grammar rules,
Mm-hmm.
you're immersed in this complete narrative.
Okay.
And that allows you to absorb those language patterns organically.
So it's more about experiencing the language in a natural context rather than dissecting it into these individual components.
Exactly. Think about how you might pick up new phrases from your favorite TV shows.
Right.
You're not actively studying the language,
Right.
but you're still expanding your vocabulary and your understanding of the grammar
Yeah.
just by being exposed to it in that compelling narrative.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that happening with some of the shows I watch. I find myself using phrases or expressions that I've heard the characters say
Right.
without even consciously trying to memorize them.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of both the TPR storytelling method and the story learning method.
Yeah.
They tap into our brain's natural ability to learn through that immersion and engagement.
So you're basically tricking your brain into learning a new language
Yeah.
just by enjoying a good story.
Absolutely. And stories have been such a fundamental part of human communication for, millennia.
Right.
It's how we share knowledge, pass down traditions, connect with each other on an emotional level.
So it's not this chore, this mountain to climb. It's more like,
It's like we can approach it with a sense of playfulness and curiosity. Like
Yeah.
we're explorers venturing into a new world.
I love that. And as you delve deeper into these stories, you start to notice those subtle nuances of the language,
Right.
the rhythm, the flow,
Yeah.
the idiomatic expressions.
Those things that give it its unique character.
You're unlocking a secret code, deciphering the intricate patterns and the beauty of the language.
And I think,
And as you become more fluent,
yeah,
I imagine it just opens up a whole world of possibilities.
it does.
Connecting with people from different cultures,
Everywhere.
understanding new perspectives, expressing yourself in ways you never thought possible.
That's precisely it. Learning a new language isn't just about acquiring a skill.
Right.
It's about expanding your horizons, enriching your life in countless ways.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about how something so simple like reading a story can have such a big impact on our brains and, our lives.
It's the power of stories, right?
Yeah, and we've been learning through stories since we were kids.
Right.
Bedtime stories, fairy tales, myths, legends, they all shaped how we see the world.
Absolutely.
It's like they're the key to unlocking our potential as learners and as people.
I think you're right. And the best part is there are so many great stories out there just waiting for us.
Yeah.
It could be classic literature or contemporary novels,
Oh, yeah.
graphic novels, or even podcasts and audiobooks.
That's a good point. It makes me think, what about our listeners? What about their favorite stories?
Oh, yeah.
Ones that they remember long after they've finished them.
Right.
What if they revisited those stories, but this time in English?
Interesting. Right. Because they already have that emotional connection to the story.
Yeah.
They're going to be more engaged and motivated to understand it.
And it could be a fun way to challenge yourself and see how much you're progressing.
As you get more fluent, you'll start to notice things that you might have missed the first time.
Yeah, like you're peeling back the layers of an onion with every reread. So as we wrap up this deep dive into storytelling and language learning, I want to leave everyone with a little advice.
Okay.
Don't overthink it. Just pick a story that you love and dive in. Let the language just wash over you.
Trust the process, enjoy the journey, and remember that every step you take is bringing you closer to fluency.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and until next time, stay curious and keep those stories coming.
All right, let's dive into this. Using storytelling to kind of boost your English learning.
Ooh, that's a good one.
We've got a lot of sources, right, for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Everything from like actual program outlines to podcast episodes.
Wow.
It's like a 360 view of how to make English learning not just, effective,
Right.
but actually fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
We always think of language learning as this structured, textbook-driven process.
Totally.
But these sources kind of remind us that our brains are like really wired for stories.
That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Instead of memorizing, verb conjugations and stuff, we could be learning through these like captivating tales.
Exactly.
But I guess my question is there any like science behind why this works so well?
There's actually a ton of research on this.
Oh,
For example, like studies have shown that our brains encode information
Mhm.
much more strongly when it's linked to an emotion. And what better way to trigger emotions than through a compelling story?
That's so true.
Right.
Like, think about a time when you were just like totally engrossed in a book or a movie or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You probably remember those details really vividly, right?
Exactly. And when you learn language through stories,
Mm.
you're not just memorizing these isolated words and grammar rules.
Yeah.
You're kind of seeing those elements in action,
Right.
understanding how they function in context,
Okay.
and making those all-important emotional connections.
So it's not just about entertainment. It's about like creating this richer, more memorable learning experience.
That's true.
But what I find really interesting is this idea that stories can also provide cultural insights.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Language isn't just a system of communication.
Right.
It's really a reflection of a culture's values, history, and even humor.
Mm-hmm.
And stories offer this really unique window into those cultural nuances.
Yep.
It's like learning English with a built-in cultural guide.
Oh, that's a cool way to put it.
Yeah,
It's like getting a glimpse into the soul of a culture through its stories.
totally.
Okay, so we've established that storytelling makes language learning more effective, more enjoyable.
For sure.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
Right.
The sources mention a few different methods.
Yeah, there's quite a range, actually.
Okay.
From simple to more interactive approaches, like
Right.
reading aloud, for instance.
Yeah.
That's fantastic for pronunciation practice.
Oh, okay.
You're not just reading the words,
Mm-hmm.
you're actively engaging your vocal cords and training your mouth to form the sounds correctly.
That's something I've always struggled with,
Yeah.
getting the pronunciation right.
Yeah,
I can see how reading aloud could really help with that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Then there's listening to audiobooks,
Mm-hmm.
which exposes you to different accents and speaking styles.
Yeah.
It's like immersing yourself in the natural flow of the language.
It sounds like a great way to train your ear,
Exactly.
especially if you're aiming for conversational fluency.
For sure.
Yeah.
But one technique that I find really powerful is story retelling.
Story retelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that forces you to actively process the information.
Yeah.
You're recalling details, putting events in order,
Okay.
and even using your own words to recreate the narrative.
So instead of passively listening,
Yeah.
you're engaging your brain in a much deeper way.
Precisely.
Okay.
And by doing that,
Yeah.
you're naturally reinforcing grammar structures.
Mm-hmm.
You're experimenting with vocabulary.
Okay.
Essentially, you're kind of turning that story into a mental workout for your English skills.
I like that, a
Okay.
mental workout.
Yeah.
But I think for some people, the idea of retelling a story might feel a little intimidating.
Sure.
What if you get the details wrong or
Yeah.
stumble over the words?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's where the beauty of interactive storytelling comes in.
Okay.
Like joining a storytelling club or workshop provides this safe and supportive environment to practice.
Okay.
You can share stories, get feedback,
Yeah.
learn from others,
Right.
and it's all in this like fun and engaging way.
So it takes the pressure off
Exactly.
and turns language learning into more of a shared experience.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be really beneficial,
Yeah.
especially for building confidence.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too carried away with the telling,
Yeah.
the source material really emphasizes this idea that story selection is like crucial.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Well, choosing the right story
Yeah.
is kind of like choosing the right workout routine.
Okay.
You wouldn't start with a marathon if you've never run before.
Right.
Right. So similarly,
Yeah.
with storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
you need to choose stories that match your language level and your learning goals.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
And the sources actually offer some helpful recommendations, don't they?
they do.
Okay.
So for beginners,
Yeah.
fairy tales are a great starting point.
Okay.
They often feature simple language,
Mm-hmm.
repetitive structures,
Yeah.
and clear moral lessons,
Okay.
which, makes them easy to follow and retell.
But some people might find fairy tales a bit too, like, simplistic.
Sure.
Especially if they're,
Yeah.
looking for something more mature
Right.
or intellectually stimulating.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
So as you progress,
Yeah.
short stories
Mhm.
offer a great next step.
Yeah, okay.
They provide more complex sentence structures and vocabulary and themes
Right.
while still being, manageable in length.
Right. Yeah.
And for advanced learners, novels are a fantastic way to truly immerse yourself
Hmm.
in the richness and nuance of the language.
So it's about, like, finding the right level of challenge.
And progressively building your skills.
Right.
But I was surprised to see the source suggesting like personal anecdotes
Yeah.
and even news stories
Yeah.
as potential learning material.
Yeah, it's interesting.
How do those fit into the picture?
Well, so personal anecdotes, right?
Yeah.
They make learning more relatable.
Okay.
Like, imagine trying to explain a funny childhood memory in English.
Right.
You're not just learning vocabulary.
Mhm.
You're kind of connecting the language to your own life experiences. So it
Right.
makes it more meaningful and memorable.
It's like adding a personal touch
Exactly.
to the learning process,
Yeah.
making it less abstract
For sure.
and more relevant to like your own world.
Exactly. And news stories, right?
Yeah.
Expose you to current vocabulary,
Okay.
different writing styles,
Mhm.
and real-world context,
Okay.
which is essential, right, for developing fluency.
Right. And understanding how the language is used in like contemporary society.
So it's not just about escaping into, like, fantastical worlds.
Right.
It's about connecting English to the world around us.
Exactly.
And speaking of connecting, the source material provides this, like, fascinating glimpse
Yeah.
into how all of this comes together
Mm-hmm.
in an example of a storytelling podcast episode.
Right. It's like a blueprint
Okay.
for how to effectively use storytelling in like a structured learning environment.
Okay. I'm curious to hear your insights.
Yeah.
What are some of the key features that stood out to you?
Well, so the episode starts with a vocabulary preview,
Okay.
which introduces key words and phrases that will appear in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is incredibly beneficial, right? Because
Yeah.
it kind of primes your brain to listen for those specific words.
Okay.
And it helps you understand them in context.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
It's like getting a sneak peek
right.
before the main event. So you're not just, like, passively listening.
Right.
You're actively engaging with the language from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then after the story,
Yeah.
there's an in-depth vocabulary review
Okay.
that goes beyond like simple definitions.
Oh, okay.
So, it includes usage examples,
Mm.
synonyms, antonyms, all those juicy bits
Yeah.
that help solidify your understanding
Mm-hmm.
and expand your vocabulary range.
It's like a vocabulary buffet.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
get to savor the language from, like, all these different angles.
exactly.
Okay.
And then there's an element that I find particularly valuable,
Yeah.
which is the discussion of cultural context.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about understanding the words.
Right.
It's about understanding the world behind the words.
Yeah. It's like what elevates it from just a language lesson
Right.
to like cultural experience. You're getting a glimpse into the history,
Yeah.
the traditions,
Mhm.
the values that shape the language.
Exactly.
So we've gone from fairy tales
yeah.
to cultural insights
Yes.
to the anatomy of a storytelling podcast.
Right?
Wow, it's amazing how much, like, depth there is
It is, isn't it?
to this approach.
Yeah.
Now, the source material teases us with a few specific story examples.
Yes.
That would be perfect for this kind of podcast episode.
Right. There's a wonderful lineup of classics.
Okay.
You know, The Ant and the Grasshopper,
Yeah.
The Ugly Duckling,
Oh, yeah.
The Three Little Pigs.
Roacid.
All, familiar and engaging tales with rich opportunities for language learning.
Let's pick one.
Okay.
And give our listeners a little taste
Okay.
of what this could be like.
All right.
How about The Boy Who Cried Wolf?
Oh, excellent choice.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale
Okay.
about a shepherd boy who repeatedly tricks the villagers
Right.
by shouting, "Wolf!"
Yeah.
When a wolf actually does appear, no one believes him.
Oh, no.
And his sheep are devoured.
It's a classic.
Yes.
A classic story about honesty with some serious consequences.
Right.
It's amazing how these simple tales can teach such, profound lessons.
They do.
Have you ever heard this one before?
Of course. It's a universal story.
Right.
It transcends cultures and languages.
Yeah.
And just imagine, right?
Yeah.
The vocabulary you could explore.
Yeah.
Shepherd, villagers, trick, consequences.
Mhm.
All these words kind of come alive
Yeah.
when you hear them woven into this compelling narrative.
It's making me want to, grab a book and start reading
Yeah.
in English, of course.
Of course.
We've covered a lot of ground
Yeah.
in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From the why of storytelling
Right.
to the how of actually using it to boost your English.
Exactly.
But there's so much more to discover.
There is.
And that's where our listeners come in.
Yes.
Think about your favorite story. Could it be a tool to boost your English?
Yeah. How would you turn it into a learning experience?
I like that.
That's the exciting part, right?
Yeah.
You get to be creative and tailor this approach
Yeah.
to your own interests and goals.
That's what I love about this whole concept.
Yeah.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules.
Right,
It's
yeah.
about finding what works for you
Exactly.
and making it your own.
Exactly. Absolutely. And speaking of making it work,
Yeah.
the source material also offers some great tips for getting the most out of storytelling for language learning.
Okay.
One that really resonates with me
Yeah.
is the emphasis on active listening.
Active listening.
Yeah, it's not enough to just, have a story playing in the background.
Right.
You really need to be fully present and engaged
Okay.
with the material.
But isn't that kind of a paradox?
Yeah.
If you're constantly pausing
Yeah,
to look up words or analyze grammar,
right?
doesn't that take away from the enjoyment of the story?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's all about finding the right balance. You know?
Mhm.
You don't want to turn story time into a chore,
Right.
but you also don't want to just let the words wash over you
Right.
without absorbing anything.
Yeah.
So it's about finding those moments where a word or phrase really sparks your curiosity.
Yeah.
Jotting it down for later
Yeah.
and then letting yourself get swept away by the narrative again.
So it's like taking mental snapshots
Yes.
of the language as you go
Yeah.
without,
Yeah,
interrupting the flow of the story too much.
exactly. And the source material also
Yeah.
highlights the importance of repetition.
Repetition.
Yeah, think about how a song
Right.
gets stuck in your head after you've heard it a few times.
Yeah.
The same principle applies to language learning.
Okay.
The more you expose yourself
Yeah.
to a particular word or phrase, the more likely it is to stick.
So even if you don't understand everything on the first listen,
Yeah.
repeated exposure helps those words and phrases gradually sink in.
Precisely.
Right.
And it's not just about passive listening either.
Okay.
Try retelling the story to yourself, summarizing it in your own words,
Yeah.
or even discussing it with a friend.
Okay.
The more actively you engage with the material,
Right.
the deeper it'll sink in.
This reminds me of something I used to do when I was first learning English.
Yeah.
I would watch movies with subtitles,
Okay.
and then I would try to recreate scenes in my head
Okay.
using the same,
Yeah.
vocabulary and expressions. It
Right.
was a fun way to practice and
Right.
make the language my own.
That's a fantastic example.
Really?
You were intuitively using storytelling techniques
Right.
to enhance your learning.
Go.
And speaking of tracking progress,
Yeah.
the source material offers some practical advice on that as well.
Mhm.
Have you ever kept a vocabulary log?
I have,
Oh.
but I tend to be a little inconsistent with it. What's your take on vocabulary logs?
Yeah.
Are they really worth the effort?
I find them incredibly helpful,
Okay.
especially if you, like, use them strategically,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Don't just jot down every new word you encounter.
Right.
Focus on the ones that are, like, relevant to your interests
Mm-hmm.
or that you encounter repeatedly
Okay.
and make it fun.
Oh, okay.
You know, add little sketches,
Right.
create your own example sentences,
Yeah.
or even like record yourself saying the words aloud.
Right.
It's about making those words come alive.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Turning a vocabulary log into something more engaging than just a list of words.
Yeah,
I can see how that would make a big difference.
absolutely. And the source also recommends
Yeah.
keeping listening logs.
Listening logs.
Yes.
Anyway.
So a record of like the stories you've listened to,
Okay.
any challenges you faced,
Mm-hmm.
and any new words or phrases you picked up. It's a fantastic way to, track your progress over time and identify areas where you might need more practice.
It's like turning your language learning into a science experiment.
Right.
You're gathering data,
Yeah.
analyzing your results,
Exactly.
and constantly adjusting your approach.
Yeah, exactly. It's about taking ownership of your learning journey and using every experience as an opportunity to grow.
And speaking of growth,
Oh, yeah.
the source material shares some inspiring success stories.
Yeah, there are so many.
From people who have actually used storytelling to improve their English.
Right.
Do any of those stories stand out to you?
There are so many great examples.
Yeah.
But one that really resonated with me
Yeah.
is the story of Maria from Spain.
Okay.
She was struggling with like grammar rules,
Okay.
finding them, confusing and difficult to apply.
Right.
But then she started reading fairy tales in English,
Okay.
and something amazing happened.
What happened?
The simple sentence structures
Mhm.
and repetitive language patterns really helped her internalize the grammar naturally
Wow.
without even realizing it.
That's amazing.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And then there's Ahmed from Egypt,
Oh.
who used storytelling podcasts during his daily commute.
Okay.
So he wasn't like actively studying, just passively listening.
Right.
But over time,
Yeah.
he noticed this significant improvement
Wow.
in his listening comprehension.
That's great.
It's a great reminder that,
Yeah.
you can learn anywhere, anytime,
Mm.
even when you're on the go.
That's something I really appreciate about this approach.
Yeah,
It fits seamlessly into everyday life.
exactly.
You don't need to carve out these hours of dedicated study time.
No, not at all.
You can weave it into your commute,
Yeah.
your workout routine,
your
even your chores.
Exactly. And finally,
Yeah.
there's the story of Ling from China,
Okay.
who joined a local storytelling club.
Okay.
She was initially like hesitant,
Yeah.
afraid of making mistakes, sounding awkward,
Mm-hmm.
but she found that having that like safe and supportive environment
Yeah.
to practice speaking
Right.
and sharing her own stories
Yeah.
boosted her confidence tremendously.
That's awesome.
It's a beautiful reminder that,
Yeah.
language learning doesn't have to be this like solitary pursuit.
Right.
It could be social
Yeah.
and even transformative
Mm-hmm.
when you connect with others who share your passion.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
Well, we've explored the why of storytelling,
Yeah.
the how of putting it into practice,
Mhm.
and even like glimpsed at the success stories of others.
Yeah.
Now it's your turn to write your own language learning adventure.
Okay.
Pick a story, any story.
I like it.
It could be a childhood favorite,
Yeah.
a classic novel,
Right.
or even something you create yourself.
Cool.
Listen, read, analyze, discuss,
Mhm.
make it your own,
Yeah.
and most importantly, have fun with it.
Right.
Remember, learning English doesn't have to be a chore.
Right.
It can be an adventure, a journey into the heart of language and culture.
But before we let our listeners go,
Yeah.
we do have one final, slightly mischievous
Yeah.
question
Okay.
to leave them with.
Why?
Remember all those practical tips we discussed
Yeah.
about active listening, repetition,
Right.
vocabulary logs,
Yeah.
even joining a storytelling club?
Yes.
What if we took all those techniques
Mhm.
and applied them to something a little more
Okay.
unconventional?
All right. I like where this is going.
Something we haven't explicitly discussed,
Yep.
but that might just be the most powerful storytelling medium of all.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it.
Oh,
It
how did-
combines visuals, audio,
Mm-hmm.
often even music and special effects.
Okay.
It can transport you to different worlds,
Yeah.
introduce you to the fascinating characters, and evoke a whole range of emotions.
Okay. Yeah.
And the best part is
Yeah.
It's readily available,
Right.
often in English,
Yeah.
and can be enjoyed again and again.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
What if
Yeah.
you use
Yeah.
movies
Ooh,
to
movies.
supercharge your English learning?
I love it.
Just imagine
Well,
watching your favorite film with fresh eyes,
hmm.
picking up new vocabulary,
Right.
analyzing dialogue,
Yeah.
even trying to retell the story in your own words.
It's a whole new dimension of storytelling practice.
It is.
So there you have it. Your final challenge.
Okay.
Explore the world of English language films
Yeah.
and see how this powerful storytelling medium can really transform your language journey.
Until next time.
Yeah.
And happy learning.
And happy watching.
Movies as a language learning tool.
Yep.
I like it. It's like we've unlocked a secret level in this whole storytelling adventure. But how do we actually make it work? Where do we even start?
It's kind of like, choosing a good book.
Okay.
Start with something that really interests you.
Right.
You don't have to dive into Shakespeare right away.
Right.
A lighthearted comedy or an animated film
Yeah.
can be a fantastic starting point.
I've always been a little hesitant to watch movies in English without subtitles.
Right.
I feel like I'll miss too much.
I understand that. I
Yeah.
mean, subtitles can definitely be helpful.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning, Think of them as training wheels, providing that visual reinforcement.
Right.
But here's a challenge for you.
Okay.
As you get more comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
try turning off the subtitles
Okay.
for short stretches
Okay.
and just see how much you can grasp just by listening.
Yeah. All right. That's a good challenge. It's like a mini listening comprehension test.
Exactly.
Way more entertaining.
Way more fun.
Yeah.
And don't forget all those active listening techniques we discussed earlier.
Right.
Pause the movie, rewind those tricky lines of dialogue,
Yeah.
and really try to break them down. And that vocabulary log we talked about,
Yeah.
it comes in handy here too.
So instead of just passively watching,
Yeah.
we're treating the movie like a language learning playground.
Exactly.
Pausing, rewinding, taking notes.
Precisely.
Uh-huh.
And don't be afraid to get a little theatrical.
Oh, okay.
If a scene really grabs you,
Yeah.
try acting it out yourself
Mm-hmm.
or retelling it to a friend
Right.
who needs drama school when you have movie night.
Uh-huh. That's a great point.
Right.
It's like taking the language off the screen
Yeah.
and making it your own.
Exactly.
Oh, and here's a thought.
Okay.
What about watching a movie in English first
Okay.
and then watching it again in your native language?
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. It's like comparing translations in real time,
Yeah.
seeing how, different languages express the same ideas
Right.
and picking up on nuances that you might have missed the first time around.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how language itself works.
Exactly.
And speaking of behind the scenes,
Yeah.
movies offer a goldmine of cultural insights too, right?
Absolutely. Pay attention to the customs, the
Yeah.
humor,
Yeah.
the social dynamics.
Right?
It's like a crash course in the culture
Right.
behind the language.
It's like having a cultural guide built into the entertainment. I never thought about it that way before.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not just about the surface level.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Research the historical context, the music, the fashion.
Right.
It's all part of the storytelling tapestry.
So we've gone from fairy tales to news stories to now movies.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing how many different ways we can use storytelling to learn English.
It's proof that learning doesn't have to be confined to, textbooks in classrooms.
Right.
It can happen anywhere, anytime.
Right.
As long as you're open to the power of story.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've had a pretty epic deep dive today.
I think so.
We've explored the why, the how,
Mm-hmm.
and even uncovered some hidden treasures in the world of movies.
Absolutely.
Well, to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have.
It's been a joy to explore these ideas with you.
And now go forth and tell your own stories.
Yes.
In English.
In English
And in life.
and in life. Until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning.